Thank you. Welcome everyone. Good evening from Bangladesh. So we are here for our session on bridging local and global local insights and global goals. Uh, Before I begin this session, I want to I just wanted to give a small introduction about why we are here. So basically, ICAD is being funded by CCG to can I ask the Zoom team to actually upload the banner just in case, just for the background, or banner for the background? That would be good. Maybe.
Okay, I'll try, Apu.
Yeah. Thank you. Basically, ICAD is now currently working with CECG, Climate Emergency Collaboration Group, to develop indicators to with the goal to bridge the locally led adaptation with the global goals and global adaptation discourse. Because ICAD is one organization that works both with local actors and grassroots, and also with an advocacy, policy advocacy with global and regional actors. We are always interested to actually bridge the disconnect between the two levels, which is something uh, that's sort of fragmented currently, and we are very interested to actually have the local voices heard in the global stage. And so when the global goal on adaptation was announced, and recently when the under the UAE Bolam work program they announced about the integrated development program, we wanted to actually use that opportunity to take our work forward, and maybe start working on some indicators that would actually help showcase to the world that maybe you can actually put the uh, locally led adaptation principles into the GGA indicators and the GGA goals. So on with that goal, we had we studied three adaptation projects and interventions across three regions in Bangladesh, to which are aligned with NAP as an entry point to our work, to find out more about how we can develop this indicator. So, and we have our presenter Morupa Mohima, a researcher working in this project, who will be presenting more about the work we've been doing. And following that, we have a group of esteemed panelists who will be giving their insights on how we can actually bridge disconnect more, this disconnection more. So I'll welcome Mohima. Please go ahead and please start your presentation and share your screen, maybe. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Morupa Mohima, and I'm working as a research officer in ICAD. And I'm currently working for the CCG project, where we are working to build indicators that is based on local-led adaptation, and that also aligns with National Adaptation Plan of Bangladesh and also Global Goals on Adaptation. So to start with how we have built the whole formulation towards the indicators that are bridging all these three elements, I have a presentation that I would like to share. So I think. So welcome everyone. So this is we officially start about to talk about the building of indicators that is bridging the global goals on adaptation into the NAP and also local led adaptation. And this is from the insights that is from the study that is done in Bangladesh. So to begin with, this is under the project that is named as ALS LDC, Adaptation and Loss and Damage Support to LDCs. And here we have started to develop context-specific inclusive adaptation strategies. That's where our main aim lies, that we want to build the strategies that will work for across the regions, all for LDCs. And then we also wanted to explore this thing throughout the national adaptation plans that these nations have, and also that aligns with locally led adaptation and the initiatives that are based on locally led adaptation. So as we can see that NAP and LLA approaches can actually be strengthening the global goals on adaptation through some indicators that are measurable and that has impact, which are grounded in the local projects that is still working on the ground. And for that, we actually have a procedure to that we follow to build the indicators to identify them. So we started with a literature review, and then we went on to do a key informant interview with experts from Bangladesh and abroad. So we can have an insight about the NAP procedures that were actually the national implementers were looking at when building the NAP, and also how LLA can actually be a key point to operationalize both NAP and global policies that talk about climate adaptation. So then we went on to identify some stakeholders and map them. And that after that comes the adaptation enablers from LLA and NAP. We will be talking about the enablers and what are their importance in the whole process in the coming slides. And then we went on to field to do a survey on local projects in Bangladesh. And we will also be talking about going forward about how many field studies we have, field surveys we have done, and why we chose those field projects and how the process went on. And then we will be talking about the data analysis and how we are producing the indicators. So the first thing that we are going to discuss is the enablers to indicators and enablers and indicators. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to build the indicators, but first we had to look at indicators as in like we needed some groundings for those indicators. So we as we are working on the Bangladesh context, so there are so many community-based and locally led adaptation projects that are going on in Bangladesh. So what we did was we looked at these projects. We looked at the literature reviews done on local led adaptation, community-based adaptation. And from there, we identified some catalyst factors that actually helped the projects to be more integrating towards locally led adaptation principles. We would like to call them enablers. And from them, from these enablers, we try to produce the indicators, or we try to categorize them in a way that actually works well with resilience, adaptive capacity enhancing, climate change impact minimizing, and that also contributes to SDG. So while doing the whole study in Bangladesh, when we were doing the project, planning the projects and implementing it, so we tried to look at the following scenarios for Bangladesh. The first one is that Bangladesh is a very diversified context for disaster, and it's also very extremely climate vulnerable. And the next thing is that we have a national adaptation plan that is inclusive of local data and information, and that is very rich with local knowledges and the actual scenario of both climate change and disaster of Bangladesh. And the third one is that locally led adaptation is one of the key points in this whole study. And we also had to consider the 8 principles of locally led adaptation and included in the whole indicators that we will be producing. So when we were starting to plan the indicators and how to produce them, we took the National Adaptation Plan of Bangladesh as the entry point. And it is based on the key informative interviews that we have done with experts from both country and abroad. So all of them agreed that National Adaptation Plan of Bangladesh has the potential to be the perfect entry point uh, for a linkage between global goals and adaptation and local-led adaptation, because the National Adaptation Plan actually promotes local-led adaptation to a level where it also includes or makes sure that the local people or the local context is present in the scenario, but it also makes sure that it is translated towards the global platforms or global arena. So we in Bangladesh National Adaptation Plan, we have almost 113 nationwide adaptation initiatives that is like a large area of for a selection that what kind of adaptation or what kind of activities we would like to look at. And then for further ease of understanding the Bangladesh's context of disaster and climate change vulnerability, Bangladesh NAP actually divides the whole country in 11 vulnerable zones, and it also have specific allocations for local led adaptation. So these three aspects of NAP actually makes it unique and a more suitable entry point for producing indicators that is also inclusive for LLA, and that won't be limited to just national level, and it will contribute to the global arena as well. So we actually chose 3 zones to work on because we have like 11 zones and not all of them can be reached within the research capacity. So we made some specific choices, and we had to go through several KIIs to actually decide that the Howrah and flash flood zone and the northern and northwestern region and the southwestern coastal area and Sundarbans would be a more suitable approach to begin with. There are other 8 zones that we can definitely work on, but to begin it from somewhere, these 3 points can be actually a good start, because these 3 zones have been very vulnerable to climate change. The uh, actual implications or the effects of climate change and disasters is very visible here, and so are the implications or interventions taken in these areas, because government or NGOs or international entities, they have been really talking about floods and droughts, and also the coastal areas where the cyclone and salinity is on the rise. So so based on these aspects, we chose these 3 zones to begin with. And from there, so as we have come to this point that, okay, we took NAP as the entry point. So where does it lead us next? So the next phase that we had to consider is the LLAs. So the 8th principle of LLA was our guiding star, let's say, to how to actually accumulate the very diversified focuses to a certain pathway. So for that, as we started with the 8 principles of LLA, and here I would like to uh, take a moment to identify that these 8 principles actually talk about the devolving decision making, where the decision making won't be just, bottom to up. It will be the other way around. And then we also will be seeing that it talks about funding, a predictable funding that is accessible, then a robust understanding of the climate risk and uncertainties, ensuring transparency, and then actually being inclusive, and investment and innovation, and also the flexibility of programs and learnings, and also a collaboration that is very inclusive of both the local perspective and also the international demands. So based on that, the 8 principles of LLA, it actually was a guiding path for us to build the indicators. And from there, we had to now go to the next phase, that is global goals on adaptation. So as we can, as like global goal and on adaptation actually talks about a lot of global aspects, but does it actually reach the demands of global-led adaptation or local adaptations. So to look at global goals and adaptation, there are actually eight. Let's if we have to like categorize it or bring it together, then it would be like eight parts that actually global goals and adaptation addresses about locally led adaptation or local adaptation. And the first one is the centering of local needs and knowledges. So if we want to, when we were working on the indicators and we were doing the field studies and we have the data, and we actually I would like to discuss two main points as an example that how these can be integrated in as indicators. So let's say if we're talking about centering local needs and knowledge, which GGA actually addresses about local adaptation, then we can see that it also talks about the importance of local and indigenous knowledge, and it also talks about the customization of the for the communities about local adaptation. And then it also talks about the inclusiveness and the participatory governance. So we have to maintain the inclusivity, and we also have to make sure that in governance, this inclusivity and this participation is available. Then we have to, then global goals on adaptation also talks about the access to adaptation finance. And here we can actually see that locally led adaptation also talks about it, that the finance has to be very much accessible. So we can also see from the findings from the field that it has to be made very direct, and simplified access to climate finance or any investment is actually a key indicator for a locally led adaptation. And then we also have to see that the funding mechanism actually is flexible, transparent, and the community can access it easily. I mean, at least it has to be made accessible. Uh, So the next thing is that we also have to see that the capacity building of these communities is done on a pretty regular basis, and that is more understandable to the local communities. So the right building. So GT also supports the building of technical and institutional organizational capacity of the localities, and also training and sharing education and knowledge with the communities. And the fifth one is that equity, justice, and rights-based approaches, that the approaches has to be just, and it has to be equitable and inclusive of the marginalized people and the vulnerable communities. And then the sixth one is the decentralization of monitoring and evaluation. So it is also a local-led adaptation also talks about it, that the monitoring and evaluation has to be decentralized, or community has to be included in this part. So global goals on adaptation also talks about it, and thus we can also take community-led monitoring as an indicator, and how they're doing the monitoring, and also develop and this is like another specified mention in global goals and adaptation, that they want to develop, they actually urge to develop indicators that will actually help the local people or local adaptation to measure the monitoring and evaluation of the adaptation. And the seventh one is that it talks about the integrated and nature-based solution. So the community solutions has to be resourced easily, and it has to be nature-based, because a lot of communities actually have good resources around them. And even if you ask them from our field studies, it is found that they actually want to use the resources that they have at hand, and they mostly are working on nature-based solutions. And the eighth one is the strengthening of local to global links, that the KIIs and literature actually supports that the NAP and local policies actually have to be the mediator between the both worlds, that the local people and the global policymakers. And the final one is the bottom-up reporting, where this whole progress and the directives has to be going both ways, not just a linear thing. So the challenges that we faced, well, developing the indicators was actually accumulating the vast knowledge and the global with all the national policies and global discourses and the local demands. So that was a challenge, but it took us a rigorous research. And then the second one is the adaptation of the right methodologies. And as we actually came up with the solution later, is that being too rigid with the whole methodology can not be much helpful. So we would like to suggest to keep it more flexible and more focused to what we want to deliver than just on the rigid process. And the third one is evidence accumulation, as in a statistical and literature-based evidence accumulation. And it actually takes rigorous research. And the opportunities, while to produce the indicators, can be that local people are actually very willing, and local adaptation that are happening in the field are actually very informative and inclusive of a lot of LLA principles. And more than that, actually, they have more breakdown factors that can be actually ventured. So that would be the presentation from our side about locally led adapt indicators, about how we produce the indicators. So if you have anything to comment and suggest, please feel free to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohima. Thank you for the insightful presentation. It was, I think, it captured our work very well. Um, so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask them in the question and answer box. We'll try to answer them through chat, or if we have time, maybe we'll have Mohima answer them later on. So now we can move to the panel discussion. So for our panel, we have a very esteemed group of experts, starting with Dr. Emily Beauchamp from IISD. She's also part of the global NAP network. So her work is very extensive in terms of monitoring and evaluation. She's involved in the global goal and adaptation process, but also the NAP implementation. We also have Dr. Laura Cole from Northeastern University. She was actually part of our one of our field trips. We were lucky to have her, and she's been helping us with designing the research, and it's really great to have her because of her expertise in terms of adaptation and at both local level and also the nuances of the global policy advocacy. But we also have Dr. Bimal Raj Regmi from IIT. He's our technical director and is also his expertise on community-based adaptation or locally led adaptation is very is particularly in the lens from the lens of South Asia is very will be very helpful for us. And we also have Mr. Mohan Kumar Mandal from Leaders Foundation. He's one of our local champions who's been leading locally led adaptation through his organization in the southern coastal region of Bangladesh. So I'd like to start with Dr. Emily. She's because of her expertise, I would like you to talk about the or set the global context about GG indicator development process and how what implications it can have in the NAP process as well. Maybe if you have a presentation, maybe you can go ahead and share and go give your intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Taryn. Can everyone hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Wonderful. So let me start this. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much to ICCCAD for inviting me to speak today. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Emily Beauchamp, and I'm the lead on monitoring, evaluation, and learning for climate change adaptation at ISD in the Resilience Group, and also at the NAP Global Network. And just to say a few words about the NAP Global Network, we are a network that supports developing countries to advance their national adaptation plan processes to help accelerate climate change adaptation efforts around the world. And we do this through three main pillars. The first is direct technical assistance to countries. The second one is through convening peer learning and learning from South-South between South-South actors, and finally through knowledge production and co-production. So I would actually start to go top down instead of bottom up for this, and to talk about a bit about the UAE Framework for Global Climate Resilience, or also called the GGA framework. But the UAE FGCR was established at COP28, and it was a follow-up on the Paris Agreement establishing the global goal on adaptation in order to frame more and give more of a definition to what we mean by pursuing adaptation under the Paris Agreement. So the UAE FGCR gives us incentives and framings for assessing adaptation progress through MEL systems, amongst other things. So a few things about the UAE FGCR is that there are 11 targets. There are 4 that represent the dimensions of the iterative adaptation cycle, or in other words, the NAP process. And there are 7 thematic targets that represent global priority sectors. Not to forget, there's also some cross-cutting indicators, cross-cutting considerations, apologies, that's a mistake on my slide. And they also clarify source of information. And amongst that, there are the national adaptation plans, biannual transparency reports, ADCOMs, and etc. Now, the follow-up to the establishment of the UAE FGCR is the current UAE BLM work program that will define complementing indicators to the UAE FGCR by COP30. So we're actively working on this at the moment. And as a small recap, what's happening is that the UAE BLM work program was established in 2023, just right after COP28. And there were submissions in July 2024. And expert groups were nominated in September 2024 to work on the indicators in parallel and in collaboration, if you want, with the negotiators. COP29 played a very key role in discussing and clarifying the mandates and the tasks for experts, and also for the subsidiary body co-chairs who are managing the work, if you want, between the negotiators or the countries and the experts. There have been 2 workshops to date, one in October 2024 and one just recently in March 2025. And these have been really key moments to help all parties better understand how we can go towards establishing the maximum 100 indicators to be agreed upon at COP30. So the state where we are now is that experts will share long shortlists of indicators by May, to be discussed at SB62 in June 25. And what I mean by long shortlist is that at the moment, experts are working on identifying and refining indicators that are really appropriate and relevant to the criteria for assessing the global goal on adaptation and the UAE FGCR, and they will present that, but it will be longer than 100. And then future work over the summer with the experts, with workshops, and with negotiators will help, hopefully, lead us to agreeing to maximum 100 indicators. Okay, well, that's great. But what does that mean in practice, and what does that mean for indicators, especially when we're talking here at the local level? Well, the point is that countries and communities need to contextualize global indicators to their lived realities, no matter what. You cannot copy-paste a monitoring, evaluation, and learning system from a country to the other, nor can you apply top-down indicators without contextualization, and that's very important. So countries must first follow their NAP process. So in order to look at their risks and their vulnerability, identify their priority areas, implement, and then set how they will assess, track, and learn from these national and local priorities through their MEL system. So in that sense, MEL system for NAP processes really play a role of coordinating mechanisms for tracking, assessing local and subnational data, ensuring inclusion, mutual accountability, and transparency. So they serve to translate evidence between the local, the national, and the global. And this needs to go step by step within the current system. And so it's critical for MEL system for NAP processes to integrate gender responsive and socially inclusive views, priorities, and vulnerable groups in evidence co-production, along with tracking means of implementation. So A few things that to remember as we're setting in this discussion is that indicators are a key component of mail systems, but they don't exist in a vacuum. So it's great to think about indicators and how to track things. But indicators are not the only thing that are part of mail system, and they're not the only thing that relates local live realities to national levels and to global levels. And I've added on the right side of my screen the content of a toolkit for monitoring, evaluation, and learning for national adaptation plan processes that the NIBE Global Network, in collaboration with the UNFCCC's Adaptation Committee, have published last year in May 2024. And you can see that amongst all the tasks and the activities for developing a mail system, selecting adaptation indicators is only one of all this. So it's really important for actors to implement indicators as part of other mail activities and methods with the aim of learning. So always do that. And I think the first presentation by Mohima really looks at capacities and other aspects that are really important. So a few things that come from our research and experience of working with countries at the NIBE Global Network is that indicators help develop long-term data and provide short-term feedback. They should complement other qualitative and quantitative data like narratives, case studies to ensure to capture the nuance of lived realities. Evaluations and progress reporting are essential to make sense of indicators as well. So let's not forget that there are other activities. And strengthening skills and capacities to develop and implement mail systems are crucial to operationalize indicators. So is finance and other means of implementation. And I want to end by reminding folks that the UAE FGCR sets a target that is definitely focused on mail, which says that by 2030, all parties have designed, established, and operationalized a system for monitoring, evaluation, and learning for the national adaptation effort and have built the required institutional capacity. So we can't do that without local efforts and some national efforts that link with the national systems and that link with NAP processes. I'm just going to finish by adding that this is the QR code for downloading the toolkit for the mail for NAP processes toolkit. And this is going to be in our presentation and should be shared afterwards, I think, Torin. And I also want to state that we also have, based on that toolkit, we have a new free online course on monitoring and evaluation and learning for the NAP process that got launched just on April 1st. So please look us up online and scan the QR code and ask us questions if you want. But there are new resources on how to do mail for adaptation, and we'd be happy to have your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for your very it was such an insightful presentation. We found out a lot about it's very helpful in linking both NAP and GGA, and and the way you actually gave us a whole the process, the rundown of the process from beginning to what it's now. So it's really great and helpful. And yes, we share the presentations with all the participants after the session. So and the toolkit is of course it's very useful. So thank you again. Next up next is Dr. Laura Koo, who's who will actually be talking about how the local and the national context can be bridged through linking LLA and NAPs, basically talking about practical experiences and drawing lessons for scaling up LLA with the national adaptation planning process. Over to you, Dr. Cool. Thank you.
Hi, it's really great to be here, and thanks for the invitation to join today. And I mean, I don't have a formal presentation. I just want to offer a few reflections that I think, rather than answering any questions, hopefully will just kind of provide some food for thought for the discussion, and some of the critical challenges that this session is really tackling, because this question of how do we bridge from local to global in adaptation is really quite a large challenge, and I think something that adaptation has really struggled with, and kind of been thinking about for quite a long time. And I want to just sort of start with this fundamental challenge that we have this concept of a global goal on adaptation and the idea that this is something that collectively, as kind of an international community, we want to be moving all in the same direction towards. And yet we also know that adaptation is an extremely localized challenge, and that what this is going to look like in different places is fundamentally different, and that creates a tension for the whole concept of the global goal on adaptation and the idea of developing, as been talked about, trying to develop 100 indicators to measure this in all the very different contexts around the world. So I just wanted to start by framing this, that this is an enormous challenge and that there's fundamental tensions between what we know about how adaptation works and the idea of also the importance of holding the international community and countries and places accountable to moving forward on adaptation. So sort of speaking about sort of how do we start to link this local and particularly locally led adaptation into these more global processes, I want to sort of step back and say, why is this going to be challenging and why is it so important? And one of the things that really is at kind of the core of this process is really thinking about power. And I think if we're going to be successful in thinking about indicators that will do this, we have to really acknowledge the huge power disparities that different actors in the system have and how that then influences all aspects of adaptation, but also the ways that indicators might be developed and also collected. So one of the things that, as Mohima was describing, this project was doing that I think is really important is really trying to see what might actually resonate as ways of collecting this information at the local level that are appropriate for local communities to answer in ways that they could actually respond and contribute to a process in meaningful ways. I think too often we've seen historically that adaptation processes, sort of monitoring and evaluation processes in particular, are very much a box ticking exercise and more about accountability to donors and ensuring that kind of successes come through to funders. And so I think the real challenge for the global goal on adaptation and having indicators that span all of these is that there is meaningful contributions at all levels, and that there's kind of space to have those truly reflect what's happening and not sort of end up with repercussions for local communities if they are honest about what isn't working, where there's failures. And so this requires a lot of trust between everyone who's participating in this process. And so I think really sort of taking time to think about what are meaningful ways that this can not just be kind of contributing to accountability, but also ensuring that there's learning taking place. And that's something that monitoring and evaluation has struggled with for a long time, of how do we ensure that there's always a tension between reporting and learning. And I'm sure that the toolkit provides some insights into that, but I think it's always kind of fundamentally a challenge and really does require trust. So that's one challenge. And then I think the other challenge that we have to acknowledge for the global goal is the sort of changing landscape of adaptation finance. And while adaptation is not just about finance, it is a really fundamental component of success, and particularly kind of in the current moment with the sort of pulling back of the United States and the closure of US aid, but also kind of repercussions across the global landscape for finance. There's a real question as to how that will impact the potential to achieve success on any of these indicators. And so I think it's really important to be collecting this information and documenting how changes at the international level are shaping adaptation outcomes on the ground, and sort of tracking and processing that information, but also ensuring that we're not just sort of feeding into a narrative that's solely about funding, because we also know that there's so much else going on in the adaptation space beyond international finance. So I think that as we look forward to what will happen with these indicators, balancing those two goals will be really important. I think I'm going to sort of pause there, and hopefully this provided a few kind of broad questions and challenges for us in this discussion, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Laura. I think you perfectly captured the essence of the question, and even though you said you didn't answer any question, but I think it kind of gave us sort of like a solution of how, or a strategic solution of how we can take things forward. So yeah, thank you for that. Um, uh, Up next is Dr. Bimal, who's uh who's been working for a long time at on the linkages between different kinds of adaptation. He's very known for his uh he's known for linking CBA and LLA with the global adaptation discourse, and we would love to hear him talk about how locally led adaptation can be integrated into national planning, and how this indicators that we've been speaking about can align with these priorities, national priorities, and the opportunities and barriers in translating these targets. Um, Over to you, Dr. Bimal.
Okay, thank you so much, Taurin. So can you see my slides? Yes? Okay.
Yes, we can hear. See it.
Okay, so thank you, ICCCAD. I think this workshop is really great in terms of looking into the cutting edge issues on adaptation and locally led adaptation from local to national to international level. So based on your topic, let me share my thoughts on some of the observation that I got from the presentation, and basically contextualizing that on the relevance of translating, GGA into local level. So the first, I think the fundamental question is about global goal and adaptation is how we can really operationalize. So the linkages with national and local systems and the processes is really, really important, because we are not just creating global goal and adaptation as a text. It should have a meaning, and that meaning, what we are looking into, is basically looking into how it can really operationalize. So that is ensuring the transparency and accountability on the part of developed countries in terms of climate financing, and the right of people and their the issues of climate justice, so that they can have adequate access, easy access to finance uh, that can be useful in implementing some of the adaptation priorities identified at the local and national level. So that is really fundamental to the departure of globally goal and adaptation. So from the local perspective to the national perspective, we really look into how it can be translated or optionalized, how practically it will help country to really decentralize locally led adaptation and scale up at the national and local level. Second is, because the way it is constructed is basically it is constructed in the global discourse on the global compliance documents, such as national adaptation plan and locally led adaptation principle, which are largely dependent on external funding and relies on external funding or resources coming from outside. But if you look into the larger landscape of how adaptation should be happen in future, there is also a role of national system, domestic and national contributions and national resource leveraging. That's why we really need to look into the national system, how it can really mainstream the spirit of globally goal adaptation, but the essence of locally led adaptation, and support that. So this is something missing in the whole discourse in terms of really looking into the national system. So that is what I really want to emphasize, is the government system, that I think on budget, on treasury, on the allocation of the government budget, And I think for scaling in a larger way in mainstreaming, I think that will be really important. And GGA to locally led adaptation, if you look into the national context, we rely on locally led adaptation principles. But if you look into national adaptation plans, these are very specific projects. So how do we really harmonize this, missing links? So that is another one that I see. So how to operationalize internationally? There are mechanisms through which countries has to report. So one is BTR, we all know, biennial transparency report. Although it is more focused on nationally determined contribution, there are elements of adaptation for least developed countries. They have this luxury or they have this flexibility in terms of reporting to that. I think these has to be aligned. So in terms of reporting, how do we really translate GGA into national and local level? So when they do this BTR, I think it should be part of this alignment so that GGA can be easily, tracked and operationalized. Second is adaptation communication. So which is linked to national adaptation plans, and the national adaptation plans that we look into how it is linked into locally led adaptation. So I think this is how we look the operationalization part of GGA at the international level. But if you look into national to local level, there are already existing system. For example, in Nepal, the government of Nepal is mandated by the law to carry out vulnerability and risk assessment and identification of adaptation options every 5 years. So this is one of the mechanisms through which GGA can be really translated at the national and local level. There is annual reporting mechanism on adaptation and mitigation at the national level. There are national monitoring and evaluation system that is used by the government. There is a climate change budget tagging that looks into how climate change is considered on adaptation. And there are different other mechanisms in terms of ensuring transparency and accountability, such as the audit system at the national level done by the formal system, as well as existing, community-based audit mechanism, such as, a public audit, social audit. So these are ways through which you can really operationalize. So why I'm emphasizing this is basically global goal on adaptation has to really recognize and create this strong linkage and synergy with the existing national and local system that should be strengthened so that it can be operationalized. Otherwise, it will be just principle-based document sitting somewhere in at the international level, and we don't get any meaningful benefit out of this. So, as a way forward, what we are really interested in terms of translating, national, international to national and national to local, and seeing the more harmonized process of developing indicators that are more meaningful is the basis of developing indicator. So we all talk about national adaptation plan, locally led adaptation principle, community-based adaptation, ecosystem-based adaptation. There are different national and local practices. So it has to, the basis for developing indicator has to be this, not really, something else. And process of developing indicator, basically we need to really ensure that there is national, there is local ownership of this process. So I think GGA need to be piloted in terms of generating evidences on railing, making it more contextual, more applicable, more tailor-made, so that it can be really operationalized. Another thing that is really important is building on past successes, because there are already good practices at the international, national, and local level that has to be considered in terms of coming up with indicators that are more flexible, more adaptive in nature, so that it can be translated. So that is building on past successes. The next one is relevance of the indicators. So if it is not relevant, if it is only sectoral inclined, if these are very generic and can't be really translated. So I think the customization of these indicators, mostly the linkages, is really important. And finally, the impact. So we need to really look into how much of the GGA process, the indicators, the goal has total bearing on generating positive impact on the society and communities, addressing vulnerability and adaptive capacity, addressing the issue of adequacy of financing, addressing the issue of access and mobilization of financing, decentralizing financing, and more importantly, the equity issue. How this particular GGA process will really address this. So I think this is something has to be discussed So bringing local national perspective to the global discourse is really, really important. And what our ICCCAD colleague have done is wonderful work through research, through evidence generation. I think that has to be done in multiple way, and these lessons has to be captured more, in the process, so that we can have more meaningful GGA target indicators or goal that will be more applicable for translating or supporting locally led adaptation in future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Bimal, and it's thank you for so clearly talking about all the different aspects of linking local, national, and global. And you made some really good points about how how it can be taken forward, the way forward. So thank you for that. So now we can. I would like to invite Mohanda, who's been working relentlessly at the local level to implement adaptation interventions. And I would like him to give a small a snapshot about how local interventions are faring in locally level and how LLA is being implemented at local level. So thank you. Mohanda, please go ahead.
Thank you, Taurin, to give me the chance to talk with in this session. I'd like to thank ICCCAD to bring me here for the fantastic initiative, and I'd like to thank Morupa for her brilliant presentation. Actually, can you please tell me how much time I can speak here, because we are running fast, you know?
Yes, I hope you can do it by 5 minutes, if that's all right.
I'll try my best.
Thank you.
So thank you. I would like to thank ACAD and all of the panelists and speakers here. I would like to focus the local level initiative what we are implementing in the southwest coastal region of Bangladesh, and I would like to try to share some limitation and challenges in the context of the local level. You know, so all of you are you know that the why what is locally led adaptations and why it is so much important. And we already know about we have seen the 8 principles what show the what we have seen in the Morupa's presentation. Basically, we are doing some community initiative. We are implementing some community initiative. We are focusing community outreach program to ensure the LLA locally adaptation in our community. And we are engaging vulnerable segment of the population, like the most vulnerable segment, the women and the elderly and the children, adolescent, and the youth people, and also the indigenous people also. We're forming the people's organizations, and we are building their capacity so that they can manage their organizations. We are providing them some seed funds and seed funds for the local action so that they can take some local action to reduce their vulnerability. And we are building their capacity so that they can design a program and they can implement, and little bit they can monitoring their program what is how they are implementing. And we are trying to support the community for a long time. We have a project we started in 2012, and we are implementing still now. So I'd like to very briefly, I would like to focus our approaches, how we are ensuring the locally led adaptation, community engagement on our main pillar, and so it is not changing. Can you please tell me? Sorry, it's a technical problem. So we are building the local capacity building on adaptation and mitigation of the community people, and we are always promoting some low cost solution, low cost technologies in the community level, and we are trying to manage the local knowledge, and also we are trying to gather the local knowledge. We are providing some support to the young researchers to gather some knowledge also from the community. and sustainable resource management one of our main priority of our program. Biodiversity, as we are working in the Sundarban region, so biodiversity conservation we are always promoting in our all programs. Collaboration, we are always trying to making collaboration with the local organizations like Union Parishad and also some education institute like universities and some research institute. And we always ensure the ownership and empowerment, ownership of the community people, so that they can feel own of our initiative. We always try to we always try to increase their financial support to implement our local program. And the policy advocacy, it is one of our main pillar what we are implementing in our coastal area. So there have a lot of opportunity in Bangladesh, that to implement the local area adaptation, and that Bangladesh is pioneer to mitigate the climate shocks, and also the disaster shocks. So Bangladesh people, they are more resilient with the extreme weather event, and it will be very good if we can building their capacity. And that will be fantastic to bring the local area adaptation, implementation of the local area adaptation. And also the the Bangladesh have a lot of policies, that BCCP, NAP, and finally we have NAP in 2022, but there have a big gap between different policies, and the policies how to produce different ministries. There have a big gap of the integration of their implementing or project approach. Like I'd like to draw your attention that but different ministries are working in the coastal area, but they are scatteredly implementing their program. There have no any integration. So we need the LLE in all of our existing policies, and also we need the integrated approach of all of our ministries. There have a significant gap. That to implement the local led adaptation in the local level. Big gap is providing finance. The NGOs and the governments who are providing the finance to the NGOs or CSOs project, they have no any adequate finance for the CSO project, and also there have no any adequate finance for reduction of the vulnerability of the community people still in the government projects. And most of the NGOs and CSOs who are implementing some projects, most of the project is tailor-made, and we are always ignoring the essential local knowledge and expertise. So local knowledge is very much important to bring the locally led adaptations. And lack of coordination between ministries and implementing bodies, like the Union Parishad, like the Water Development Board, like the government, agriculture minister, even the fisheries minister. They are implementing a lot of projects in the community level, but they have the big gap to integration each other. And comprehensive understanding of the concept of locality adaptation is missing in the community, because most of the NGOs who are working, we are always focusing adaptation, mitigation, resilience. But how does it mean by LLA? What does it mean by nature-based solution? People don't have proper idea about the locally adaptation approaches, and also the principles of the locally adaptation, what is essential to bring the prosperity of the community people. And limited initiative to building capacity of the community people. Like I already mentioned that most of our project is tailor-made, and we may not impose some important activities when we are applying some projects of donor-based projects. And lack of learning process means the NGOs and CSOs, even in the local government, we have the big gap between our learnings and our understanding and what is the field reality. So, and the less financing community-led adaptation. Most of the NGOs are implementing the project by themselves, but they have no any initiative to building their capacity and give them the seed funds so that they can implement, they can design their program and they can implement their project also. And it is I am giving some way forward based on the real field situation. Relevant policies, we need to integration of relevant policies and interministerial action for the community prosperity. Interministerial action means that different ministries are implementing a different project, so they need the integrated actions. And community, to ensure the LLA, we need the flexible and durable funding from donor and from the government. But what is very scared in the in Bangladesh also. CSOs and people's organization they have, but they have the capacity gap. So we need to building their capacity and national level initiative. We need national level initiative for adaptation and compensation for the vulnerable communities. Local government institute one of our main pillar of our project implementation by government, but they don't have any capacity to capacity on disaster mitigation and also the climate change mitigation and adaptation and resilience. And we need to ensure the transparency mechanism of CSO and the government project as well. So that is my presentation is in brief. So if you have any question, I am here to answer all of you. Thank you, everybody, for their patience hearing.
Sorry. Thank you, Mohanda, for your great presentation about what work you're doing and the gaps and challenges and also the opportunities that you're facing and addressing at the local level. I think it ties up perfectly with our uh, uh, the agenda of our session, which is basically bridging the local action with global goals. And that's why I wanted you to speak to have a local voice, a local champion be heard about how the local work is going on and how it's actually to what extent it's actually being aligned with the national policies and priorities. So thank you for giving us a snapshot of that. I'm really thankful for the productive discussion we've had so far today, and all the panelists have given us some really good uh, s- inputs and insights on how this process, the indicator development process from the global level, can be linked to the national priorities, national plans, to the local uh, actions. And I think I think we can it can be said that the process of indicator development is actually it will actually help us gain a perspective of addressing adaptation better at both the national and local level. And DGA process cannot be looked at in isolation or in as a separate separate lens. It should also always be looked at a lens from the national priorities and also how it can be translated to the local action. And I think we can also understand that indicators need the deep research and analysis for ensuring that adaptation is not in vain. Uh, Laura also said about the process not being not only a response to the demand of investors or donors, which a lot of the NGOs and organizations like us working with donors face the struggle of to actually being our work being a response to donors and investors. So it's a process of evolution of looking at adaptation through I think multiple lenses and looking at it a very nuanced lens. So we also hope to have the work that we're doing. We hope to have it capture those lenses, to capture the perspectives from local level and also national priorities, and also be meaningful in a global context as well. It's very challenging for us, those of us who are doing this work, but I think the challenge is what makes it interesting as well. So thank you to all the panelists for all your insights. There were some questions, and I think the panelists have answered all of them. Thank you to the participants for being patiently with us through the conversation. This conversation will continue, and we will follow up with the presentations and also with the outcomes of our work soon with you, hopefully. So thank you. Thank you, Emily, for your presentation. Thank you, Laura, for your insights, and Dr. Bimal for linking all the sites with us, and also Mohanda for bringing the local insight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.